In a quiet farming village surrounded by endless fields and dusty roads, there lived a young farmer named Daniel. He wasn't known for having the best land, the strongest animals, or the biggest harvests. In fact, most people in the village barely paid attention to him at all. Daniel worked hard, but luck never seemed to stay on his side for very long. His small farm produced just enough to survive. Some seasons were better than others, but none were remarkable. Still, Daniel had something most people didn't notice: patience. Every morning before the sun rose, he walked through his fields, checking the fences, cleaning the barn, and preparing feed for the few animals he owned. It wasn't much, but it was his life, and he treated it with quiet dedication. One afternoon, Daniel traveled to a livestock market in a nearby town. Farmers from different villages gathered there to buy strong animals, horses that could run fast, pull heavy carts, and work long hours in the fields. Daniel didn't have much money in his pocket. In truth, he didn't expect to buy anything that day. He only wanted to look, to see what others were doing, and maybe learn something as he walked through the market. He saw powerful horses standing proudly beside their owners. Their coats shined in the sunlight. Their muscles moved under their skin with strength and confidence. Buyers surrounded them, asking questions, discussing prices. Daniel kept walking. Then, near the far edge of the market, away from the noise and attention, he noticed something different. A small brown horse stood quietly near a wooden fence. Its ribs were visible beneath its coat. Its posture was weak, and while other horses were admired and examined, this one seemed almost invisible to everyone around it. Daniel slowed down and looked at the animal carefully. The horse didn't move much. It only watched the ground in front of it, as if it already knew no one was interested. An older man standing nearby noticed Daniel's attention and let out a short laugh. "You're not thinking about that one, are you?" he said. Daniel didn't answer right away. The man continued with a shrug. "That horse can barely run. Nobody wants it." Daniel looked at the horse again. For a moment, the animal lifted its head and met his eyes. There was something quiet in that look, not strength, not pride, just a strange kind of calm. And in that moment, Daniel made a decision that would soon become the talk of the entire village. Daniel asked the seller about the horse's price. The man looked surprised for a moment, then shrugged. "If you really want it, I'll sell it cheap," he said. "Most people don't even stop to look." Daniel didn't bargain. He didn't argue. After a short pause, he reached into his pocket and handed over the small amount of money he had brought with him. The seller shook his head slightly as he untied the rope from the fence. "Well," he said with a small laugh, "I hope you know what you're doing." Daniel gently took the rope and began leading the horse away from the market. The horse walked slowly beside him, its steps uneven but steady. Some people nearby noticed and watched with curiosity. Others simply laughed. "Look at that," one farmer said loudly to his friend. "He paid money for that horse." Another voice joined in. "That animal won't last a season." Daniel heard every word, but he didn't react. He simply continued walking down the dusty road toward home. By the time he reached the village, the story had already begun spreading. In small places, news traveled quickly, especially when it was something people could laugh about. Later that evening, Daniel tied the horse near his small barn and brought it a bucket of water. The animal drank slowly, as if it wasn't used to being treated with patience. Daniel sat on a wooden stool nearby and watched quietly. He noticed small things others might have ignored. The way the horse kept its balance carefully. The way its ears moved when it heard distant sounds. The calm rhythm of its breathing once it finished drinking. Maybe the horse wasn't strong. Maybe it wasn't fast. But Daniel didn't believe it was useless. The next morning, he began working with the horse, slowly, carefully, without pushing it too far. Some villagers passed by his field during the day and stopped to watch. At first they only smiled. Then the jokes began. Training a champion, are you? Someone called out with a laugh. Daniel kept walking beside the horse, guiding it gently along the dirt path that crossed his land. The horse stumbled once, then regained its balance and continued forward. The people watching laughed again, but Daniel did not stop. Weeks passed, and Daniel continued working with the horse every single day. He never rushed the animal. Instead of pushing it to run faster or pull heavier loads, he focused on small improvements. A little more balance, a few more steps without stumbling, a little more strength each week. At first, nothing seemed to change. The horse still moved slowly. Its body still looked thin compared to the powerful animals owned by other farmers, and the villagers never stopped talking. Whenever Daniel walked the horse along the road, someone would always make a comment, still training that champion. Maybe one day it will learn how to stand without falling. The laughter became a normal part of Daniel's routine, but something else was happening, something most people didn't notice. The horse was learning to trust him. It followed his voice. It adjusted its steps when he guided it. And little by little, the weakness people saw began to hide a quiet determination. One afternoon, as Daniel was working in the field, a group of farmers passed by talking loudly about something happening in the neighboring village. A small race this weekend, one of them said. Nothing serious, just a local event. Daniel didn't pay much attention at first. Local races were common during harvest season. Farmers brought their strongest horses, and villagers gathered to watch. But that evening, as Daniel brushed the horse inside the barn, the idea returned to his mind. A race, not because he believed the horse could win, not because he wanted to prove anything to anyone, but because it might be the first time. The horse stood among others without being ignored on the morning of the event. The village road was filled with movement. Farmers arrived with large, powerful horses. Their animals looked fast, confident, ready to run. Then Daniel appeared, walking beside his small brown horse. The laughter started almost immediately. Some people whispered. Others didn't bother lowering their voices. You brought that horse here. This will be over before it even starts. Daniel didn't respond. He simply walked the horse to the edge of the field and waited quietly. The race had not started yet, but for the first time since buying the horse, Daniel felt something different in the air. Not laughter, expectation. The horses lined up along the edge of the open field. Some of them were tall and muscular, their coats shining under the afternoon sun. Their owners stood proudly beside them, adjusting reins and preparing for the start. Daniel stood quietly near the far end of the line. His brown horse looked smaller than the others, thinner, less impressive. A few people in the crowd pointed and laughed again. That one won't even make it halfway. Someone said. Daniel heard the words, but his attention stayed on the horse. He gently placed his hand on its neck and spoke softly. just loud enough for the animal to hear. The race organizer raised his arm. The field grew silent for a moment. Then the signal came. The horses surged forward almost instantly. Powerful hooves struck the ground, sending small clouds of dust into the air. Within seconds, the strongest animals had already taken the lead. Daniel's horse started slower than the others. For a brief moment, it looked exactly as everyone expected, weak, hesitant. Trailing behind the pack, some people in the crowd began laughing again. But something strange happened a little. Further down the track, while the other horses pushed hard from the beginning, Daniel's horse kept a steady rhythm. It didn't rush. It didn't panic. Step by step, it continued forward with calm focus. As the race continued, one of the leading horses began to slow. Another drifted slightly off its line. The early speed that had looked so impressive began to fade. Meanwhile, the small brown horse kept moving at the same steady pace. The crowd slowly grew quieter. Daniel watched from the side of the field, his eyes fixed on the track dot with every passing moment. The gap between the horses began to close. The laughter stopped completely. People leaned forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. The horse no one believed in was still running, still moving forward, still steady, and by the final stretch of the track, it was no longer the last horse. When the race ended, Daniel's horse crossed the finish line among the leading group. It wasn't the fastest. It didn't break any records, but it had done something far more surprising. It had proven everyone wrong for a few seconds. The field was completely silent. Then the whispers began. People who had laughed earlier now looked at the horse with different expressions. Some nodded quietly. Others simply watched in disbelief. Daniel walked toward the horse and gently held the reins. The animal was breathing heavily, but its posture was strong and proud. He placed his hand on its neck again and smiled softly. The race had never been about winning, it had been about giving a chance to something everyone else had already given up on. And sometimes, that is the kind of victory people remember the most.